The US has just crossed one of Iran's red lines. It flew 7 heavy bombers carrying more than 400,000 pounds of explosives across the Atlantic Ocean directly to Iran with the intent of attacking the country's most heavily fortified nuclear facilities. And Donald Trump says it worked.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
That assessment is a very early one. The US military says it does not yet know exactly how much damage it caused, except to say it's significant.
Initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
But what we know more about is how the US military says it executed such a complex attack.
Take a look at the facilities up here and over here. Now look, this is gone.
An attack that appears to have caught Iran completely off guard, and for which that country has now promised to make the US pay everlasting consequences.
This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security.
What Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, along with America's top general, Dan Kane, laid out for reporters at a Pentagon press briefing was a plan whose success relied heavily on secrecy.
In and out and back without the world knowing at all.
At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, Operation Midnight Hammer would begin with a large strike force of B-2 bombers, leaving Whiteman Air Force Base just east of Kansas City, Missouri. This was the first attempt to fool anybody watching.
As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy.
Yes, this mission started with a fake-out, and we can tell, at least anecdotally, this westward flying decoy was noticed. Social media is full of avid military plane spotters, like this one, posting tracking data of what they're seeing in the sky. And as the US military had hoped, much of the focus appeared to be on the planes flying west. The easiest assumption would have been that they were deploying to Guam, Anderson Air Force Base. For Americans, one of the most important forward operating bases west of Hawaii with almost unrestricted airspace. And look at these headlines from just before the attack. US officials revealing to reporters that yes, as Trump mulled over a possible strike, he would indeed be deploying B-2 bombers to the region. Because from Guam, those warplanes could fly to another US base, Diego Garcia, in the heart of the Indian Ocean, and a critical staging ground for military missions in the Middle East. Operation Desert Fox in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, even during the Iranian Revolution in the late 70s, Diego Garcia, the island, was seen by the US as a kind of unsinkable aircraft carrier. So flying a set of bombers there might appear like typical US military behavior, especially for this part of the world.
That's a normal military operation for us. And when I saw the news, I wasn't surprised. All of warfare is deception, and that was a brilliant move by the United States, sending the B-2s to Diego Garcia and make it appear that they were going to be stationed there ready and on call, not necessarily waiting to be attacking that night.
So this would have seemed to journalists like a key piece of the puzzle if Donald Trump was indeed seriously considering a bunker-busting strike on Iran's nuclear program. But look one more time at that social media post we showed you a moment ago. This one reply date-stamped almost exactly 1 hour after those B-2 bombers first took off, but noticing a different set of planes. 9 B-2s heading due east.
The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications.
Now, just for transparency, I actually don't know why someone might have seen 9 bombers heading east when only 7 were part of the so-called strike package. I suppose it's possible the person saw incorrectly or that 2 of those bombers at some point peeled off. But the official count is 7. 7 of the most advanced stealth bombers in the world, maintaining as much radio silence as they can get away with as they began what would be an 18-hour journey across the Atlantic. 3 times along the way, according to US officials, this strike group of 7 B-2 bombers had to refuel in midair, something that required dozens of tankers at various aerial refuel points.
The operation of refueling a B-2 is complex, but it's routine. It's practiced, it's rehearsed, it's engineered down to the very last level.
Now, what's interesting is that under optimal conditions, these bombers are actually capable of flying almost that entire distance without refueling at all. But 2 things. 1, you don't run a high-stakes military mission and risk running out of gas. You never know, for example, if you'll have to divert somewhere unexpectedly. But 2, payloads matter. These bombers were burning an incredible amount of fuel, in part because each one was carrying 60,000 pounds of explosives. That's 2 30,000-pound bombs each. Bunker busters intended to penetrate literally hundreds of feet of mountainous rock, the only way anyone knows is possible to reach Iran's most heavily protected nuclear facilities from above. But there was more.
At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Esfahan.
Yes, so this is where the timing and logistics of the mission would become even more complex, and I'll explain how. As those bombers are approaching Iranian airspace, it's nighttime in Iran, 2 things are happening. 1, the bomber formation is linking up with air support, fighter jets meant to protect and distract, as the entire group heads for 2 Iranian nuclear sites, Natanz and Fordo, where the vast majority of the country's uranium enrichment happens. But timed with their entry into Iran, a US submarine launches cruise missiles, dozens of them, from just off Iran's southern coast. These are fired early, but because of their travel time, they are timed to strike Isfahan. That's a 3rd nuclear site immediately after Natanz and Fordo are hit by the bombers, so as to maintain the surprise factor of the main mission.
At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas.
14 bombs at 30,000 pounds each. That's approaching 500,000 pounds of explosives dropped in all. And we can see from satellite imagery what the main attack on Fordo left behind. This is what that nuclear site looked like before the attack. It's buried deep beneath these mountains. And here's what it looked like after. That bluish gray is what experts believe is ash and debris kicked up by the blast. But look particularly at this area here. The before, nothing really unusual about the dirt or the ridges in the mountains. But the after, 2 very clear sets of 3 holes, what are believed to be the exact points at which some of these bunker busters pierced through the earth to reach the hundreds of uranium centrifuges thought to be below. The hole patterns line up with how these bombs are meant to be used on a site like Fordo, which again is built much deeper than a single one of these bombs can actually reach. So the idea is to drop several of them effectively down the same hole, or as close to that as you can get, so that with each successive bomb, you're drilling closer and closer to the target, either just outright destroying it or causing enough structural damage to effectively accomplish the same thing. When all was said and done, all 3 sites had been hit by the bombers and the Tomahawk missiles, within a window of about 25 minutes from the first attack to the last. That's a very tight window if you consider the total mission time was more than 30 hours.
I'm not sure what intel analysts are hanging around the Iranian leadership right now, but no one calculated that the United States still had this capacity to leave from an airbase in Missouri and fly to the Middle East and fire up this mission and then fly home.
And according to U.S. officials, American warplanes didn't suffer a single scratch.
We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us.
Right now, there are two really big questions. The first is, how does anyone know how much damage was caused when all you can see on the surface is holes?
I wouldn't be surprised if Israel tries to get some commandos there, likely U.S. Forces, JSOC, Special Ops, put a small crew and small team together to go try to put their eyes on them themselves, just to see what exactly is going on, to try to, get battle damage assessment. I think that's going to be the most reliable, which is why this whole process is going to take weeks.
I should point out, though, I've also seen reporting suggesting that in the days leading up to the attack, there was unusual truck and vehicular activity at Fordo, 16 cargo trucks along the access road, which, if nothing else, raises the possibility that Iran might have been shuttling nuclear materials out of Fordo in anticipation of the worst. We just don't know. Iran has downplayed the attack, saying the damage was not irreversible, but at the same time swearing it would take revenge.
The Iranians have made very clear that they are prepared to attack U.S. forces and the countries that are basing them if the United States were to get in.
The United States has over 40,000 soldiers in the Middle East, most of whom are in the Gulf and would be at some serious risk if Iran decided to engage them.
They may also be prepared to take action against oil and gas transport infrastructure depots that are either in those countries or transiting the Straits of Hormuz. They could take action to try and close the Straits of Hormuz that would further ensnare the United States into the conflict and run the risk of damaging international trade.
Iran's foreign minister has warned of everlasting consequences, saying Iran reserves all options to defend its sovereignty, interest, and people.
Iran says it fired missiles at an American airbase in Qatar. Qatar says its air defenses intercepted Iran's missile attack.
But so too has the U.S. threatened Iran, because in its view, this was a very limited strike against very specific targets. And if Iran were to seek retribution, Donald Trump says the U.S. can and will find other targets to hit.
There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
So the really big question, after more than a week of death and destruction, Israel and Iran locked in a deadly series of missile strikes, is whether the U.S. becoming more directly involved than ever before might just end the war or start a new one.